Hello, everyone. Today we're diving into the chaotic world of Tiswas, the Saturday show that shocked an entire generation. But after the laughter faded, the cast's real lives took shocking turns from huge success to quiet disappearances and heartbreaking losses. Let's uncover the cast in 2026. Some of them may shock you. David Rappaport. We come to David Rappaport, the actor remembered for portraying Shades, one of the strangest and most unforgettable characters in the chaotic world of Tiswas. He was 30 years old at the time, and his unusual presence instantly caught the attention of viewers. Small in stature but enormous in personality, Rappaport brought a sharp, rebellious energy that made his character stand out among the cast. Rappaport died on May 2, 1990. At the age of 38 after shooting himself in Laurel Canyon Park in California. The sudden loss shocked fans and colleagues who had admired his fearless performances. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around £500,000, reflecting a career that had earned recognition, but never fully reached the heights many expected. Earlier in his life, Rappaport refused to allow his physical condition to define his limits. Born with achondroplasia and standing 1.19 meters tall, he developed talents in music and performance from a young age, playing both the accordion and drums. After studying psychology at university, he moved toward acting and quickly began attracting attention. His film role as Randall in Time Bandits introduced him to international audiences, followed by appearances in The Bride, Robin of Sherwood, and the American television series The Wizard. These roles proved that his talent could command the screen regardless of his height. However, life away from the cameras was far less stable. His marriage to Jane Whitehead ended while he was pursuing his acting career, though they had a son named Joe together. Even while appearing in television projects such as Ella Law and voice acting for Captain Planet, he struggled personally. Shortly before his death, he had begun filming a role in Star Trek: The Next Generation, but the production was forced to replace him before the episode was completed. The actor who once filled the screen with energy and confidence was gone at just 38, leaving behind a career that many believe could have gone much further. John Asher. Next is John Asher, one of the earliest presenters connected to the chaotic beginnings of Tiswas. At 25 years old, he worked alongside Chris Tarrant as part of the well-known Tiswas twins. His role involved guiding viewers through the show's unpredictable sketches and games, helping shape the anarchic style that later became its trademark. Asher later died in 1989 at the age of 39. Because his career was mainly tied to early television presenting and broadcasting work, his estimated net worth was believed to be under $500,000. Before appearing on Tiswas, Asher worked as a continuity announcer for ATV, a role that prepared him for live broadcasting. His most visible work remained the early era of Tiswas, where he helped establish the chaotic Saturday morning format that later became iconic. Unlike other presenters who moved into acting or national television fame, Asher largely remained in broadcasting circles and local media. While his career did not continue in the spotlight, his early work still helped shape the unpredictable style that made Tiswas famous among British television audiences. Chris Tarrant. We come to Chris Tarrant, the energetic host who became the wild ringleader of Tiswas. He was 28 years old, leading the show as its central presenter and driving the chaos that defined its unpredictable style. As the loud, fast-talking figure guiding sketches, pranks, and games, Tarrant quickly became the personality audiences associated with the madness of the program. In 2026, Chris Tarrant is 80 years old and widely regarded as one of Britain's most recognizable television hosts. His fame exploded when he became the face of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, turning the phrase, "Is that your final answer?" into one of television's most famous lines. He also hosted long-running shows such as Tarrant on TV and later the documentary series Chris Tarrant Extreme Railways, Decades of broadcasting, endorsements, and production work built an estimated fortune of about £15 million. Away from the cameras, however, his personal life was far more turbulent. His marriage to Sheila Roberton ended in divorce after the couple had 2 children. Years later, he married Ingrid Dupree Walsh, but that relationship also collapsed after tabloid scandals, forcing him to publicly admit he had deeply hurt his family. During the same period, a shocking arson attack destroyed his boat on the River Thames, an incident that nearly endangered his family and left him furious and shaken. Then, a frightening health crisis changed everything. While returning to London after filming Chris Tarrant Extreme Railways, he suffered a mini-stroke on a flight and required emergency treatment to remove a blood clot. The scare forced him to slow down after more than half a century in broadcasting. Eventually, after 52 years on television and radio, Tarrant chose to retire from regular broadcasting. Sally James. Next comes Sally James, the presenter many viewers remember as the glamorous face of Tiswas. She was 27 years old, serving as the show's main female host, and conducting the famous pop music interviews that became a signature part of the program. Her confident presence made her one of the most talked-about personalities on Saturday morning television. In 2026, Sally James is 76 years old and living a much quieter life away from mainstream television. Before her hosting fame, she had already appeared in films such as To Sir with Love, The Railway Children, and Never Too Young to Rock. She also performed with the group Four Bucketeers, whose single Bucket of Water song reached number 26 on the UK charts, helping turn the Tiswas presenters into unlikely pop stars. Her long career and later business ventures have brought an estimated net worth of around £2 million, but her personal life also carried unexpected challenges. She married talent agent Mike Smith, and together they raised 3 sons, including Adam Smith, who later became a presenter on Sky Sports. Yet even this close family experienced tension when political disagreements surrounding Brexit divided the household, placing parents and children on opposite sides of the debate. Then, an even deeper challenge arrived when one of her sons faced a serious health diagnosis. The experience forced the family to focus on what mattered most. Gradually, James stepped away from the entertainment industry and began running a school uniform business in Surrey, choosing stability over television fame. Even so, for many viewers, she will always remain the woman who brought music legends like Sting, The Clash, and Iron Maiden onto Tiswas, leaving behind a legacy that still surprises audiences decades later. Lenny Henry. We come to Lenny Henry, the young comedian who brought wild characters like Algernon Razzmatazz and Trevor McDonough into the chaotic universe of Tiswas. He was 20 years old, already showing the sharp comic talent that would later make him one of Britain's most famous entertainers. Today, Lenny Henry is 68 years old and remains one of the most respected figures in British comedy and television, with an estimated net worth of around £9 million. His long career includes major shows such as The Lenny Henry Show, Chef, and film appearances like True Identity. He later lent his voice to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and appeared in the epic series The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Over the years, he also became widely admired for co-founding the global charity event Comic Relief, raising millions for humanitarian causes. Behind the success, however, his personal life experienced major turning points. Henry married comedian Dawn French, and the couple adopted a daughter while becoming one of Britain's most recognizable comedy partnerships. But after 25 years of marriage, they quietly separated and finalized their divorce. The split shocked many fans who had long seen them as one of the most stable couples in British entertainment. Yet Henry refused to slow down. He returned to education later in life, earning a BA in English literature, then a master's degree, and eventually a PhD focusing on diversity in media. Alongside stage performances such as Othello and Fences, He continued to campaign publicly for better representation of minorities on British television. Decades after making audiences laugh on Tiswas, Lenny Henry remains not just a comedian, but a powerful voice for change in the entertainment industry. Bob Carolgees. Next is Bob Carolgees, the entertainer many viewers remember for bringing puppet characters like Spit the Dog and the mischievous figure Hootie Elbow into the madness of Tiswas. He was 31 years old, appearing as both a comedian and puppeteer who added absurd humor to the show's unpredictable sketches. In 2026, Bob Carolgees is 78 years old, with an estimated net worth of around £1 million. Beyond Tiswas, he became known for television appearances and for performing alongside Cilla Black on Surprise, Surprise. He also appeared on shows such as Hold Tight and Concentration. As part of the group Four Bucketeers, he helped release the novelty single Bucket of Water Song, which reached number 26 on the UK charts. His personal life, however, took several turns away from television fame. Carolgees married Allison, and the couple had one child together. Over the years, he gradually stepped away from regular television work and focused more on live performances, including entertaining British military troops for nearly 2 decades. The shift surprised many fans who had expected him to remain a constant presence on television. Eventually, he moved into an entirely different path. Carolgees opened Carolgees Candles, a candle shop in Frodsham, Cheshire, building a small but successful business outside the entertainment industry. Though he occasionally returned to television events such as Tiswas Reunited and pantomime performances, his life became far quieter than the chaotic show that made him famous. Even so, the image of Bob Carolgees and his wild puppets remains one of the strangest and most unforgettable memories from the world of Tiswas. John Gorman. We come to John Gorman, the older comic presence who brought PC Plod into the chaos of Tiswas and helped fuel its most ridiculous musical moments. He was 41 years old, playing the deadpan troublemaker who could turn a children's sketch into something hilariously unpredictable. And that's where the story gets surprisingly emotional. In 2026, John Gorman is 90 years old, still recognized as a cult legend of British comedy with an estimated net worth around £500,000. Long before television, he helped build the comedy music trio The Scaffold, scoring hits like Thank You Very Much and the Christmas #1 Lily the Pink. Later, he stayed connected to television through projects such as OTT and How Dare You, proving he could survive beyond the wild world that made him famous. But his private life carried losses that never made headlines the same way the jokes did. He had 3 children from his first marriage and later became a father and grandfather again in a new chapter of life. Yet one of his children passed away, leaving a permanent shadow behind the smiles. After meeting his second wife, Sue, in France, he moved there and lived on a 6-acre farm for years, stepping away from the spotlight and focusing on writing, almost like someone trying to heal by disappearing. Then, quietly, he returned. He came back to the UK, took on work as an artistic director, and kept showing up in unexpected places. A reunion with the Tiswas crew, appearances tied to Chris Tarrant, and even renewed interest in The Scaffold during the 2020s. It's strange to think the man who once played a ridiculous TV policeman ended up living a life marked by both laughter and real grief. Sylvester McCoy. Next is Sylvester McCoy, the unpredictable performer who turned Tiswas into a playground for his physical comedy and strange characters. He was 35 years old, appearing as the wild, stunt-driven entertainer who could make the show feel like anything might happen at any second. In 2026, Sylvester McCoy is 83 years old, still active and widely respected, with an estimated net worth around £3 million. His early life carried deep trauma. His father died in wartime before he even had the chance to know him, and later his mother suffered a breakdown and was hospitalized, leaving him to grow up with emotional gaps most people never see. Even his identity felt unstable. He didn't fully understand his real name until he was older. That instability strangely became fuel for his career. He was discovered in the London theater world and became infamous for extreme stage routines. Then came the role that changed his life, the Seventh Doctor in Doctor Who, a character he played in a darker, more manipulative style that shocked longtime fans. Years later, he reached global audiences again as Radagast in The Hobbit. Yet even while his career grew, the personal chapter stayed complicated. He built a family with his wife Agnes Verkake and had 2 sons, but his life always carried the feeling of someone who survived something early and never fully stopped running from it. And that's what makes his story so striking. He began as an unpredictable comic on a chaotic kids' show, then became one of the most iconic sci-fi characters of all time. Peter Tomlinson. We come to Peter Tomlinson, the deep-voiced broadcaster who didn't just host Tiswas. He helped create it, then guided the early chaos as one of its original presenters. He was 31 years old, acting as the calm anchor between cartoons while still encouraging the kind of improvised madness that made the show feel dangerous in the best way. In 2026, Peter Tomlinson is 83 years old, still active in broadcasting, with an estimated net worth around £1 million. After television, his voice stayed everywhere. He moved into radio leadership, became a senior executive at Saga Radio West Midlands, and even lent his voice to the famous quiz show Blockbusters. More recently, he returned to the microphone with a weekly Sunday program on Serenade Radio, proving he never truly left the airwaves. But the most surprising chapter came after he was already known as a media figure. Instead of fading quietly, he stepped into public service and took on official roles that most TV personalities never touch. He became High Sheriff of the West Midlands, then later won election as a county councillor, eventually rising to become chairman of Worcestershire County Council. And that's why his story hits so differently. Trevor East. Next is Trevor East, the on-screen sidekick who helped keep Tiswas moving when the show was still finding its identity. He was 30 years old, presenting alongside the core team and bringing the upbeat confidence of a sports reporter into a children's show that rarely followed the rules. He wasn't the loudest face in the chaos, but he was part of the engine that kept it running. In 2026, Trevor East is about 82 years old, known far more for sports media leadership than children's television, with an estimated net worth around £800,000. After his early presenting days, he rose through the industry to become a major figure behind the scenes, taking roles like executive leadership in televised sport and later working as a sports director at Setanta Sports. He also became associated with major broadcast battles over football rights. That shift changed his public image completely. He went from being a familiar Saturday morning presenter to becoming one of the people shaping what the country watched on weekends through sport. His name became tied to ITV's major production work, including high-level involvement in snooker coverage and later football broadcasting decisions that influenced the industry. And that's the twist in Trevor East's story. He didn't chase celebrity, he chased control. He helped build chaos for kids, then moved into the world of sports broadcasting where the stakes were bigger, money louder, and mistakes cost millions. Gordon Astley. We then arrive at Gordon Astley, the man who stepped into Tiswas during its final chapter when the show was already a national sensation. He was 33 years old in 1981, brought in as a presenter for the last series alongside Sally James. By that point, the program had already become legendary, and Astley had the difficult task of keeping the chaotic energy alive after major personalities like Chris Tarrant had moved on. In 2026, he is 78 years old, with an estimated net worth of around £600,000, built through a long and steady career in radio. Before arriving on Tiswas, he had already been making his name behind a microphone. He hosted The Breakfast Show on Mercia Sound when the station launched in 1980, and later worked at Beacon Radio and BBC Radio WM. What many fans don't realize is that Astley also had a completely different talent outside broadcasting. He was a professional magician and mind reader, even performing magic shows internationally, including appearances in Atlanta, Georgia. His passion for illusion earned him membership in the Magic Circle. That unusual combination made his career far more diverse than the average broadcaster. Astley continued working in radio for decades, eventually spending nearly 15 years at BBC Southern Counties Radio, where he remained until 2009. Even after leaving full-time broadcasting, he stayed connected to the entertainment world through speaking engagements and performances. Looking back, Gordon Astley's story is one of quiet longevity. Den Hegerty. Next comes Den Hegerty, one of the most unpredictable personalities ever to appear on Tiswas. He joined the show in 1981 at the age of 27, bringing with him the wild stage energy that had already made him famous in the British music scene. With his booming bass voice and chaotic performances, Hegerty quickly became one of the most memorable figures in the show's final series. In 2026, Den Hegerty is 72 years old, with an estimated net worth around £700,000. Born in Dublin in 1954 and raised partly in England, his life was marked by a serious health challenge early on. While studying English at university, he began suffering from major epileptic seizures, forcing him to drop out in his final year. That moment could have ended his ambitions, but instead it pushed him toward music. Hegerty soon formed the retro rock and roll band Darts, which exploded in popularity in the late 1970s with hits like Come Back My Love and The Boy from New York City. Known for his manic stage presence, he became famous for performances so wild that audiences sometimes didn't know whether to laugh or be afraid. But behind the scenes, things were far less glamorous. During intense touring schedules, he once didn't even know his father had nearly died until after leaving the hospital. Frustrated by management he later described as dishonest, he walked away from the band in 1978, despite their success. His life then took a surprising turn. After brief solo work, including the single Voodoo Voodoo, and even a guest appearance on The Clash's album Sandinista, Hegerty gradually stepped away from music and returned to education. In the 1990s, he went back to university to study psychology, partly to understand his own epilepsy. He later became a psychology lecturer at Exeter College and the Open University, eventually retiring in 2023. Today, he lives quietly in Devon with his wife and son, a long way from the chaotic days when he was the madman of music jumping into fountains on stage. Frank Carson. Then there was Frank Carson, one of the loudest and most recognizable comedians ever to step onto the chaotic stage of Tiswas. When he appeared on the show in 1974, Carson was already 48 years old, older than many of the presenters but impossible to ignore. With his booming Belfast voice and famous catchphrase, he quickly became one of the personalities that audiences remembered long after the sketches ended. But Frank Carson's life before comedy was far more dangerous than his stage persona suggested. Born in Belfast in 1926, he grew up in a working-class Catholic family as one of 6 children. After leaving school, he worked as a tradesman before joining the British Army's parachute regiment. During his service in the Middle East, he was involved in violent conflict, at one point shooting an armed terrorist and surviving an attack where he himself was shot in the leg. In another incident, a bomb exploded outside a cinema shortly after he left, killing the 7 RAF men he had been with moments earlier. When he returned to civilian life, comedy became his escape. Carson first gained attention on Irish television, then crossed to Britain where he began performing in working men's clubs. His breakthrough came when he won the national talent show Opportunity Knocks 3 times, launching him into mainstream fame. Throughout the 1970s, he became a regular face on television, appearing on shows such as The Comedians, The Good Old Days, and eventually, Tiswas. Despite undergoing heart surgery in 1976, he refused to slow down and continued performing across television, theater, and cabaret stages. In later years, Carson remained beloved not just for his jokes, but for his generosity. He raised large sums for charity and was honored by the Catholic Church in 1987 when Pope John Paul II awarded him a papal knighthood in the Order of St. Gregory for his charitable work. However, his health deteriorated in his 80s, and in 2011 doctors discovered a malignant stomach tumor. On February 22, 2012, Frank Carson died at his home in Blackpool at the age of 85, leaving behind his wife Ruth, their 3 children, and an estimated net worth of about £1 million. For decades he had made audiences laugh, but behind the punchlines was a man who had survived war, illness, and a life far more dramatic than many of his jokes suggested. More than 50 years later, the story of the Tiswas 1974, cast then and now in 2026, shows just how much time can change, and how powerful those memories still are. Some of these stars continued long careers, while others left us far too soon. Which Tiswas star do you remember the most? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more journeys through classic television history.